Assalamu alaikum dear student. My name is Dr. Muhammad Adnan Askar and today we are going to discuss about the differential thermal analysis DTA and differential scanning calorimetry DSC under the subject of thermal analysis. In this lecture we will actually discuss the differences between DTA and DSC and their joint applications and different aspects of chemistry. So first is the thermogravimetry TG. Thermogravimetry TG measures the change in mass of a substance as a function of temperature or time. The results appear as a continuous record as shown in this figure. The sample is heated at constant rate and has a constant mass Mi until it begins to decompose at temperature Ti. Under conditions of dynamic heating, decomposition usually takes place over a range of temperatures Ti to Tf. Here we can see in this picture. And a second constant mass plateau is observed above Tf, which corresponds to the mass of the residue Mf. The masses Mi and Mf and the differences delta M are fundamental properties of the sample and can be used for quantitative calculations of compositional changes, etc. By contrast, the temperature Ti and Tf depend on variables such as heating rate, nature of the solid, for example its particle size, etc., and atmosphere above the sample. The effect of atmosphere can be dramatic, as shown in figure for the decomposition of calcium carbonate CaCO3 in vacuum. Decomposition is completed at about 500 degrees Celsius, but in carbon dioxide at atmospheric pressure the decomposition does not even commence until above 900 degree Celsius. Here we can see this. Ti and Tf pertain to the particular experimental conditions, therefore, and do not necessarily represent equilibrium decomposition temperatures. So the next is differential thermal analysis DTA and differential scanning calorimetry DSC. In DTA, the temperature of a sample is compared with that of an inert reference material during a programmed change of temperature. The temperature should be the same until some thermal event such as melting, decomposition, or change in crystal structure occurs, in which case the sample temperature either lags behind or leads if the exchange is exothermic. In case of lags behind, the change is endothermic, while in leads the change is exothermic, the reference temperature. The reason for having both a sample and a reference is shown in this picture. For example, in A diagram, a sample is heated at a constant rate. Its temperature Ts monitored with the thermocouple varies linearly with the time B until a endothermic events occur, melting at temperature Tc. Tc is known as the Curie temperature. The sample temperature remains constant at Tc until the event is completed. It then increases rapidly to catch up with the temperature required by the programmer. The thermal event at Tc therefore appears as a rather broad deviation from the sloping baseline in figure B. Such a plot is insensitive to small heat effects. Further, any spurious baseline variations caused by, for example, fluctuations in heating rate would appear as apparent thermal events. Because of its insensitivity, this technique has limited applications. Its main use historically has been the method of cooling curves, which was used to determine the phase diagram. The sample temperature was recorded on cooling rather on heating, and since heat effects associated with solidification and crystallization are usually large, they could be detected by this method. In this figure C, the arrangement used in DTA is actually shown. Sample and reference are placed side by side in a heating block, which is heated or cooled at a constant rate. Identical thermocouples are placed in each and are connected back to back. When the sample and reference are at same temperature, the net output of this pair thermocouple is 0. When a thermal event occurs in the sample, a temperature difference delta T is exist between sample and the reference, which is detected by the net voltage of thermocouples. A third thermocouples, which is not shown here, is used to monitor the temperature of the heating block, and the results presented as delta T versus temperature D. A horizontal baseline corresponds to delta T is equal to 0 occurs and suppressed on this sharp peak due to thermal event in the sample. The temperature of the peak is taken either as the temperature at which the deviation from baseline begins, T1, or as a peak temperature, T2. So this is the T1 and the peak temperature T2. Although it is probably more correct to use T1, it is often not clear where the peak begins, and therefore it is more common to use T2. The size of delta T peak may be amplified so that events with very small enthalpy change may be detected. For example, in figure D, it is clearly a much more sensitive and accurate way of presenting data than B, and it is a normal method for presenting DTA and DSC results. DTA cells are designed for maximum sensitivity to thermal changes, but this can be at expense of losing a calorimetric response in which peak areas or peak heights are related only qualitatively to the magnitude of the enthalpy changes occurring. It is possible to calibrate DTA equipment so that quantitative enthalpy values can be obtained, but it is better to use DSC for quantitative measurements. DSC is quite similar to DTA. A sample and an inert reference are also used, but the cell design is different. In some DSC cells, the sample and reference are maintained at same temperature during heating, and extra heat input to the sample or to the reference if sample undergoes an exothermic change required in order to maintain this balance is measured. Enthalpy changes are therefore measured directly. In other DSC cells, the difference in temperature between sample and reference is measured. as in diffraction calorimetry. But by careful attention to cell design, the response is calorimetric. So about the applications of DSC and DTA. The use of TA are many and varied. Generally, DTA DSC is more versatile than TGA. TGA detects effects with involves mass change only, and we have studied a lot about thermogravimetric analysis, which was only used to detect the loss of mass with respect to temperature or other conditions, so which do not involve the change in mass. For many applications and many problems, it is advantageous to use both DTA and DSC and TG together, because DTA DSC events can then be classified into those which do and those which do not involve mass change. An example is the decomposition of kaolin, which is the Al4Si4O10 and OH8, and shown in the figure. By Tg, a change in mass occurs at about 500 to 600 degrees Celsius, which corresponds to the dehydration of the sample. This dehydration shows up on DTA as an endotherm, while a second DTA effect occurs as 950 to 980 degrees Celsius, which has no counterpart in TG traces. Here we can see very clearly there is no counterpart in the TG curves. It corresponds to recrystallization of dehydrated kaolin. This effect is signals a decrease in enthalpy of the sample and therefore a change to a more stable structure. The details of the structural changes that occur at this transition have still not been fully resolved. Another useful ply is to follow the thermal changes on cooling as well as on heating. This allows a separation of reversible changes such as melting or solidification from irreversible changes such as most decomposition reaction. A schematic DTA sequence illustrating reversible and irreversible changes is shown in this figure. Starting with the hydrated material, the first event on heating is actually the dehydration and shown with A, which requires heat input and is detected as an endotherm. Subsequently, the dehydrated material undergoes a polymorphic transition, which is also a endothermic and shown as B at some higher temperature. Finally, the sample melts, giving a third endotherm shown as C. On cooling, the melt crystallizes as shown by an exothermic C. The polymorphic change also occurs exothermically B, but rehydration does not occur. This diagram therefore shows two reversible and one irreversible processes. On studying reversible processes which are detected on both heating and cooling, it is common to observe hysteresis. The exotherm on cooling may be displayed to lower temperatures than the corresponding endotherm on heating. Ideally, the two processes should occur at same temperature, but hysteresis ranging from a few degrees to several hundred degrees are commonplace. The reversible changes in figure are also shown with small hysteresis. Hysteresis depend on the nature of the material and the structural changes involved. Transitions involved the breaking of strong bonds are likely to exhibit much hysteresis. Hysteresis occurs particularly on rapid cooling. In some cases, if the cooling rate is sufficiently fast, the change can be suppressed completely. The change is then effectively irreversible under those particular conditions. An example of great industrial importance is associated with glass formation as shown in this figure. Beginning with a crystalline substance, for example silica, an endotherm appears on when the substance melt. On cooling, the liquid does not crystallize but becomes supercooled. As temperature drops, its viscosity increases until eventually it becomes a glass. Hence, crystallization has been suppressed entirely. In case of silicon dioxide SiO2, the liquid is very viscous even above the melting point, which is about 1700 degrees Celsius, and crystallization is quite slow even at slow cooling rates. An important use of DTA and DSE in glass science is to measure of glass transition temperature, represented with TG. This appears as a broad anomaly in the baseline of DTA curve as shown in figure that already discussed. So, beginning with the crystalline substance, silica and endotherm appear when a substance melts. On cooling, the liquid does not crystallize but become supercooled. As the temperature drops, its viscosity increases until eventually it becomes a glass. Hence, crystallization may be suppressed entirely. Tg represents the temperature at which the glass transforms from a rigid solid to a supercooled, very viscous liquid. The glass transition represents the upper temperature limit at which the glass can be used and also provides a readily measurable parameter for characterizing glass. For glass which kinetically are very stable, such as silica glass, the glass transition is the only thermal event observed on DTA, since crystallization is usually too sluggish to occur. For other glasses, however, crystallization or devitrification may occur at some different temperatures above Tg and below the melting point Tf. On heating, the devitrification appears as an exotherm and is followed by an endotherm at higher temperatures that correspond to melting of these same crystals. Example of glasses which readily devitrify are metallic glasses. They may be prepared as thin films by rapidly quenching certain liquid alloy compositions. Other important glass forming materials are amorphous polymers and amorphous chalcogenide semiconductors. Polymorphic glass transition may be studied easily and accurately by DTA or DSC. Since many properties may be modified or changed completely as a sequence of phase transition, their study is extremely important and useful. For examples, ferroelectric BaTiO3 has a Curie temperature Tc of about 120 degrees Celsius, which may be determined by DTA. Substitution of other ions of barium or titanium causes the Curie temperature to change. For many substitutions, Curie temperature or Tc may vary by tens or if not thousands, hundreds or degrees, and therefore measurements of Curie temperature can be an accurate indicator of composition. In cements, the beta polymorph of Ca2SiO4 calcium silicate has superior cementonious properties to a gamma polymorph. The effect of different additives on the transition can be studied by DTA as well as DSC. In refractories, transitions such as alpha to beta quartz or quartz to cristobalite have a deleterious effects on silica refractories because volume change associated with each transition reduce the mechanical strength of the refractory. These transitions, which should be prevented from occurring if possible, may be monitored by DTA. DTA DSC is a powerful method for the determination of phase diagrams, especially in conjugation with other techniques such as X-ray diffraction for phase identification. Its use is illustrated in picture B here. For two composition in a simply binary eutectic system shown in A, on heating composition A, melting begins at eutectic temperature T2 and gives an endothermic peak. However, this is superposed on a much broader endotherm with which terminates approximately at temperature T1 and which is due to the continued melting that occurs over temperature range T2 to T1. For this composition, an estimate of both solidus T2 and liquidus T1 temperatures may therefore be made. Composition B corresponds to eutectic composition. On heating, this transforms completely to liquid at eutectic temperature T2 and gives a single large endotherm peaking at T2 on DTA. If DTA traces for range of mixtures between X and Y are compared, all should give an endotherm at T2, the magnitude of which depends on the degree of melting at T2 and hence on the closeness of the sample composition to the eutectic composition B. In addition, all compositions apart from B should give a broad endotherm at some temperature above T2 due to the completion of melting. The temperature of this peak should vary with composition. Polymorphic phase transitions also appear on phase diagram at sub-solidus temperature, and these may be determined very readily by DTA, especially if solid solution form and the transition temperature is composition dependent. In multi-state decomposition processes, Tg, either alone or in conjunction with dTA, may be used to separate and determine the individual steps. A good example, the decomposition of calcium oxalate monohydrate as depicted in this picture. The decomposition occurs in three clear stages, giving as intermediate anhydrous calcium oxalate and calcium carbonate. Many other examples of multi-state decomposition occur with hydrates, hydroxides, oxysalts, and some. This is all about the comparison of DTA and DSC in thermal analysis. I do believe that you got the quite comprehensive knowledge of DSC as well as DTA, and now we compared both techniques and saw different applications of DTA as well as DSC. In the next lecture, I would like to describe the joint venture of DTA and DSC in terms of phase transition. So for this, thank you.